Tea and a Buddy podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
Today's episode is about Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who has sadly died at the age of 99.
99, yeah.
99, yeah.
That was a good long life.
That was a good... Well, he was a couple of months shy of turning 100.
Yeah, that sucks so much, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You make it that long and you're just like, come on, let me just make it to 100.
He retired in, I think, 2018. Or 2017, 2018, something like that. He finally retired from royal life, you know.
Which basically means what, exactly?
Which means, you know, they weren't making any more public appearances.
He doesn't have to... Well, that's not true, though, because I'm sure I've seen him since he said he was going to retire.
Yeah, you've seen him, but not how he wanted to be seen.
What do you mean?
He had that crash, didn't he?
Oh, God.
He was driving and everything. And
yeah, but I'm sure he was at... something. I don't remember what, but it seems like he made an appearance. He just wasn't doing any more like ribbon cutting or
going
that
touring
kind of
factories
stuff, right?
And everything. Yes, I mean he was retiring from all that aspect of it.
Which I was looking it up the other night, and apparently the Queen doesn't even really do a lot of that stuff.
No,
anymore.
it's all delegated to Charles and William.
Yeah.
Now.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be Harry, but we know what happened there.
And she doesn't. Oh yeah, that's
another story.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, she said like several years ago she stopped traveling too.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not going to any of the Commonwealth countries. That's up to you guys now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think... I think it's just Charles and it's just who's directly in line to the throne now. It's all falling on them.
Didn't I also see somewhere, and this is getting slightly off topic, but that her 70th anniversary was coming up as queen, that they
2023. Yeah.
Oh, that's in 2023.
Is it the 70th?
Yeah, that's what I saw. Yeah. The reason they were talking about it, they were going ahead with plans for it based on the fact that her mother lived to be like 101.
I think she was 101 when she died. She died in 2002
and was making public appearances almost up until she died. So they're basically expecting the Queen. They're like, yeah, she's in perfect health. Don't see anything really happening anytime, you know.
She's
soon.
She's going on, you know, and then people are, she's going to step down, she's going to abdicate, you know. It's like, no, she's not. She's going to let this run on. Yeah.
Well, they said that she has said multiple times that she said it, I guess, when she was coronated or whatever, that this is a job for life.
Job for life, isn't it? Yeah.
And so they're saying, you know, when they get asked that question, they're like, for life means for life. She has absolutely no intention of, because I guess a bunch of the heads of state, is that the correct thing to call them?
Of what now?
Monarchies elsewhere in Europe.
Oh, yeah. They
all retired once they got to be a certain age. They retired the crown, and I guess it went to their kid, or it went ahead on to their kid.
They're purely ceremonial, really, in things like Spain, and I think Italy has one too.
Oh yeah.
I know Denmark do. You know, Greece had. Well, I think they did have one. I mean, all these European countries have had like semi-successful revolutions, which, you know, abolished the monarchies. I think it's Denmark and Norway and stuff like that, you know, and Sweden.
Yeah. Apparently, once they got to a certain age, they were like, too old for this queen nonsense.
Too old for this queen or king nonsense now, you know. And it's just, you know, they're not as big a deal.
Yeah.
Around the world.
But you would think that
the British royal family, you know.
But you would think that being less of a big deal would mean that they had less to do, and therefore could have just theoretically stayed king or queen until they died.
Yeah.
You would think with all that she actually still has to do, she would be like, you know what, I'm 94 94, 95, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 95. I think
I mean,
good.
you know, it's just like, what does she do on a typical Monday, you know, and all this kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth now, you know?
Yeah.
People, what does she do on a typical Monday? Gets up, she reads the paper, she has breakfast, you know, signs correspondences from, you know, the Home Office or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, the Foreign Office gives them stuff to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't they bring her like all the information of whatever's being discussed in Parliament just to like look at, and you know, just to keep up to date with.
Yeah. Just
so she knows what's going on and
in the red box. Yeah.
What bills they're looking at passing or laws or whatever. Yeah, she's got to know all of that kind of stuff. Whereas, you know, Philip. He didn't.
Well, he was just Queen Consort. Philip was.
Yeah. What does consort mean exactly?
It means just like wife or husband of the reigning monarch.
That's what consort actually means.
Consort. Oh, okay. Yeah, because you're consorting with them, you know.
Yeah.
So he's just going, you know. I mean, he married her in 1947, and she was still the princess then, but she was heir presumptive.
Yeah.
She was going to be queen after George VI died.
Yeah.
And he did, I think, about 5 years. He did in 1952. And she wasn't coronated until like a year later or something, you know?
Yeah. What did he die of again? Because she and Philip were on vacation or they were on tour somewhere.
They were in Kenya. They were in Kenya or something. They were, yeah.
So it's like
or it was Kenya.
So
as
it's
they
like,
used to call it, as the old establishment used to call it, Kenya.
Kenya.
In Kenya.
But it's not like he was on his deathbed then. I guess it's not like they knew. Any day now.
He had some sort of like surgery. I think it was like some sort of heart bypass surgery. And I don't know if he died immediately after that or, you know, he lived a few months and then died.
Yeah.
But he was in rather poor health towards the end.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Crown portrays it like that too, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like lung cancer or something he had. Yeah, it was some sort of like cancer he had. And she, you know, she took up the throne and she's been with us ever since, you know.
Yeah.
You know, Charles and everything.
And Philip was with her the whole time.
Philip was with her the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole crazy journey.
Yeah.
He was there, doing his thing.
So, yeah, they were making quite a big deal about the fact that, and they do in The Crown as well, if you guys have seen The Crown, that he, you know, being that it was the 1950s, he went down and kneeled in front of her, the husband. Yes. You know.
Because he was, what it was is, you know, she met him in like 1934.
She's related to him.
She's related to him. They're third cousins.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So related, but also not really.
Yes. I mean, they're both grandchildren of Queen Victoria, but Queen Victoria was, you know, grandchildren of everyone in the royal families across Europe.
Oh, yeah.
She had like
of kids.
200,000 kids, 9 children and all that, you know?
Yeah.
Who went out and married into the royal families across Europe to strengthen the ties, you know, and the empire and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Well, he was born into the families, the royal families of Greece and Denmark. I think his father was Greek, and then when he was like 18 months old, they were exiled from Greece because of a failed invasion of Turkey or something it was, you know.
Yeah.
So they were like, get rid of the royal family of Greece, and he was educated. You know, his family, his mother, and I mean his sisters and stuff like that. It was a lot of like issues there. You know, his mother had like schizophrenia.
Well, first of all, before you get into all of that, because Dominic and I were watching a documentary the other night.
Channel 4 documentary.
The night that he died, was it? Or maybe the next night?
Yeah, the next night something.
It was just about an hour long about his life. And I didn't realize they were talking about all the different royal families that he had direct bloodlines to.
Yeah.
And it was like the Russian, I mean, you mentioned the Greek and
Russian, Prussian, Denmark, yeah.
But he was like, he was directly in line for all of those royal families, which made him technically more royal, in quotation marks, than Elizabeth herself.
Yeah.
Being that she was not in line for the throne.
Yeah. I mean,
until her uncle abdicated.
She was not in line to the throne.
Yeah. She would have just been a Beatrice and Eugenie.
Yes, she would have. They'd just been
cousin to
and they
whoever.
were happy to do that. Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, which was the Queen Mother.
But I thought that was interesting to find out that he was more royal than her, really. So I can understand that when she was crowned, him kneeling before her, it was a little bit of a big deal at the time, and remembering that he did that was still kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, as you say, his family
had a lot of it was a kind of a tragic story. His family was. I mean, he had sisters, and I think they say he had a favorite sister, Cecily or something, and she married a German duke, and in something like in the late 30s they became members of the Nazi Party.
Yeah.
And I think some of his other sisters as well, his other sister was fond of the Nazi Party too. And he was living in Britain at the time. He was in the Royal Navy, I think, because I think when he was about 1939 or something, he joined the Royal Navy.
Well, he went to school in Scotland, right?
Yeah, Gordonston.
So I think that was first, wasn't it?
That was first, yeah.
And that was
he was educated all over the place, but mainly in the UK.
And that was what? That was sort of like a military academy type place, right? It was quite a strict kind of school.
Yes, it was run by this Jewish guy I can't remember his Kurt Hahn or something. Kurt Hahn.
Yeah.
And he wanted to kind of like regiment the boys who attended this school as like, this will be good for their life,
Yeah.
And so, that must have had an effect in him. I mean, later on, he tried to get Charles to go there, but Charles hated it.
Yeah.
Charles was a very delicate nature. He was more of a mummy's boy than Philip,
Yeah.
Than into Philip.
Well, Philip's mother, I think you mentioned, didn't you?
She went into, I think she
was schizophrenic.
And she went into a mental institution very early on. And his family kind of separated. Yeah, his dad went off to live with his mistress, and
the kids just
scattered around Europe because they were exiled from Greece.
Terrible.
And so he was never really
backstory.
Yeah, and it's terrible because his sister.
Oh, I know why he went to Britain. Because his
Mountbatten.
Yeah. Because he had
Louis
family
Mountbatten
there.
was there. Yeah. They brought him up.
The Mountbattens were his it was his uncle, right? On his dad's side.
Yes.
Something.
They were living in Britain, and they were living at the grace and favour of the British royal family at that time.
Yeah.
And so he went to live with them there. And,
And they, too, were a German family, right? Because he was
yeah.
It's very complicated,
isn't it?
It's complicated
because they changed their names because of political affairs and everything like that.
He was part of the Greek royal family, but he had no Greek in him. He was not Greek at all.
No, he was not Greek, no.
They were like German.
They were imported
and Danish.
they were imported from Denmark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very complicated because we were watching it. Dominic was like, well, he was like part of the Greek family. And I was like, he does not look Greek at all. So we kind of had to look it up and stuff because we were like, yeah, he does not look anything about him Greek. And yeah, he was not Greek. But yeah, he was a member of the Greek, which you can kind of see why maybe Greece was like, get him out of there.
The Greek royal family was not Greek.
Yeah.
It was Danish, and it was imported They went to live in Greece and became their royal family. And then after a while...
Which you can see why Greece was like,
get them out of here.
What are they doing?
Get them out of here.
How we got them.
Where did they come from?
Yeah.
Why are they here? Yeah. Nobody likes you. And it's just, that's what it was. I mean, again, it's kind of like, the grandmother of the babushka of Europe, Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
And all her descendants descending on all these countries that, they need a royal family.
Usually they tried to marry somebody who was from that country, though, so that they couldn't marry.
They obviously couldn't marry. I mean, maybe they did. I can't. You'd have to look into
somewhere a little further back.
Further back, and then it's just all because it was a relatively new one.
Yeah.
But
anyways, so he went to live with Mountbatten. The Mountbattens.
Yeah. He went to school in the UK. He went to the Royal. He entered the Royal Navy and fought in World War II. I mean, he was obviously close to the royal family growing up. And he was, so he met Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Then, and, started corresponding with her, and everybody says, oh, yeah, he was her first love.
Yeah.
Because she was only like 13 when she started writing him letters or something,
Because the Crown portrays that she was really supposed to marry somebody called Bertie, or I want to say Bertie.
Bertie.
Bertie? No, it was something else.
What, her horse trainer? It was the Duke of...
he was like the Duke
of somewhere.
A little friend, and they kind of grew up together. And it was always thought, oh yeah, they'll marry each other. But I guess she was just saw him as a friend.
She either saw him as a friend... And, they were writing letters to Philip all the time. But, of course...
She saw Philip and she was
like,
this is the institution again.
Well, she was all into him.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they'd been talking... And, he was a few years older than her. Yeah, about 4 or 5 years older. She was 1926 and he was 1921, yeah.
Yeah.
I think 1926, I'm not really sure. Maybe 1925. So, he kept in contact with her. And this Bertie or whoever was like, it was just someone, she was going about with.
Yeah.
But, of course, the institution,
yeah,
the firm, were probably pushing, don't marry a foreigner.
Yeah.
Don't marry this guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, he's, oh, no, you don't want to marry him. You want to marry someone who's, because, the Queen Mother and all that, calling him the Hun and all that kind of stuff, because, he was he had very much like German heritage and stuff. Well, they were German too,
Let's get to that in a second, because you started telling a story that I think I cut you off. So when he was in Britain, going to school or part of the Royal Navy, he got word about his sister. His favorite sister. No,
that was a couple of years before he joined the Royal Navy, that was. His sister was coming over to... His sister and her husband, who was the Duke... This is very confusing now. of Duke of Hesse, I think he was, or he was going to be. They were...
they were members of the Nazi Party.
They joined the Nazi Party because they were living in Germany. And at that point, Hitler was the way forward.
Yeah.
Because, they've always said, the royal family...
He was Time Magazine's Man of the Year. I always say that, it's like...
They always say that the royal family are Nazi sympathizers, a lot of them. Edward VIII, there was a plot to install him as the king and everything, and he thought Hitler was a nice chap, even up until he died.
Yeah.
Oh, Hitler was a nice chap, and World War II was called by the Jewish people and the communists.
Apparently that's why. Everybody always says... it was because him, and he abdicated because of his love for this American divorcee that the family wouldn't let him, but it was really had to do with the fact that he was a Nazi sympathizer. Yeah. And they were I gotta get him out of here.
About 5 years ago, footage emerged. Someone gave it to the Sun newspaper. That was shot. There was like home movie footage from 1933 showing the then Prince of Wales.
Prince Philip. Oh no.
No. Edward VIII.
Oh, before he
and
was.
I think she was like 8 or something. Elizabeth.
Oh yeah.
And the Queen Mother doing a Nazi salute.
Oh God!
From
what?
1933. Well, it looks like
I don't remember hearing about that.
And and it's just like this was 1933 when he became Chancellor.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like nobody knew what was going on then. That was what she was 7 years old. She didn't know any better. And they probably didn't either. Maybe Edward VIII did.
Yeah.
And you can't really say they were Nazi sympathizers back then when probably everyone in the thing was, oh, Hitler's doing well.
Yeah.
This Hitler guy, he's the way forward.
He brought Germany out of the Depression.
He brought him out of the Depression, and this is what his Nazi party likes to salute as, they were doing that,
Yeah.
And it was just like a few seconds of like footage. Grainy black and
white
footage.
I thought you were going to say the footage that we saw in that documentary of him at his sister's funeral.
Yeah, then his sister died on the way to Britain, and her husband and their kids.
They were just going on vacation, or?
No, they were going for a wedding.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Of something.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane took off and it crashed into a thing near Ostend in Belgium.
Yeah. And
apparently they were trying to land because Cecily was in labour because they found remains of a child.
Oh.
At the crash site.
Mm.
And, so he had to go for the funeral. And of course, because they were members of the Nazi party, there was Nazis all over the place. And
yeah, with the armbands.
And everybody was doing Sieg Heils and,
And he was just there, like, in his black coat.
Yeah, yeah. And so they go, oh yeah, Prince Philip, he's a Nazi.
Yeah.
And because of some of the gaffes he's made over the years.
Yeah.
Where he's been quite insensitive and, where he's trying to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
And it's missed the mark entirely,
Yeah.
But yes, after he entered the Royal Navy and he was...
He met
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And then after the war, he was granted permission by George VI to marry her.
Yeah.
And just before the official announcement, he abandoned his Greek and Danish titles and became a naturalized British subject.
Yeah. Changed his last name.
To Mountbatten.
Yeah. Because his last name was something that sounded very German, and you can just imagine,
I can't remember what it was now. Yeah.
Mountbatten to me sounds quite...
Mountbatten, yes.
Yeah. It doesn't sound British, I don't think.
No, it was...
With
that's
the Batten, especially.
It's an anglicized version of something else.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And it comes across that way, in my opinion. And of course, everybody, I say of course, I didn't realize this, but at the time, apparently, he was given a super hard time by the media,
the press
of the day.
The newspapers were like,
this foreigner.
Foreigners coming in here, we don't like this.
Yeah.
He's a dirty foreigner, he's German.
Yeah.
Like, just fought a war against the Germans, so,
Yeah,
terrible.
Everybody didn't like him from the get-go, apparently, which sort of just really reminded me of the Meghan Markle stuff, the way she sort of, in my opinion, portrayed that she was the first person that experienced these kinds of things from the royal family and from the British public and stuff, when in actuality, it's fairly normal for someone new to come in and the British public to not like them, It's
yes.
Especially if they're not British, you know? And, so apparently he had a really hard time at first, but then I guess won everybody over with just the way that he was quite personable, as opposed to, like, the Queen, and
he was he was a little bit more
reserved.
Down to earth.
Yeah.
If you can say that.
Yeah.
He was a little bit more down to earth.
Yeah.
But he was, at the end of the day, he was a posh boy.
Well, yes.
He was going out with his mates, and they were forming little clubs and doing all that kind of stuff. It was like he was getting into all sorts of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And once he became, once they were married, he was created the Duke of Edinburgh and everything like that, and he was created a prince later on then,
Mm-hmm.
He was granted the title of prince.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
he was
just
right
Philip.
away?
He was just Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
Oh, yeah.
the early years of their marriage.
Duke of Edinburgh, the early years.
Yeah.
Why? Why was he not prince from the get-go?
Well, made a British prince anyway, because he was Prince of Denmark.
Because he was already a prince. Yeah, he was already a prince.
He abandoned his Dutch and Greek titles and became a British citizen, so he was just Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Yeah, because, and as you see in The Crown, in like I think season 1 and stuff, they're all kind of like, oh, we don't want to, just get rid of him. What are you doing? Go marry Bertie or whoever it was. You know,
whatever. I can't remember.
We don't want to be messing with him. And
it was something very British. One of those little like
Rupert or something. Yeah, it was some guy. But yeah, they married and they stayed together. I mean, they had the kids and kept going. And I mean, the gaffes. Yeah. Over the years have been numerous.
Well, he had sort of a his first big-ish scandal was in the 60s, wasn't it? And it was with that because of his partying scandal. And stuff.
Yeah, that's when they brought him to heel, I think. He realized, I've got to get this all under control and I can't be doing this now.
Because he was out partying with the boys and basically living like a playboy, like a playboy bachelor, life.
Yeah. But after the Perfumos, his best man was kind of like embroiled in that because of Stephen Ward and everything like that. And it was like no mention of this in the papers, whatever. And it was like this big scandal, and they kept Philip's name out. I don't think he ever saw that guy. I think he was like the Duke of the Marquis of something. He was his best
show.
He was like, they kept him away from Philip, and he gave up that lifestyle in like the early 60s, and it was done. The Queen took him in hand and was like, yeah, okay, you might have had a wonderful time.
He's like, he comes in, he's instantly hated, and then he wins people over because he's a bit wahey waho with them.
Yes.
And then it's like a scandal, and then they're like, oh, cut it out, you stop doing that, you straighten up.
Yeah.
And then he does, and then it's just like one gaff after the next.
Well, because they sent him on these around.
Well, he needed something to do.
Yeah, he accompanied the Queen on her numerous visits and did like world tours on his own and stuff,
Yeah.
And he would come up with stuff like, in the mid 60s he'd come up with like, British women can't cook. He'd say that.
Yeah.
And then he said to
Tom
Jones after the Royal Variety performance.
Maybe that was his experience, though, having lived in other countries. Maybe in his opinion he was like, you know what, British women can't cook.
British women, they can't cook. Can't cook to save their lives.
It's like it's not exactly something that you hope that, the prince of your country to say.
It's very kind of like off the cuff remarks.
Yeah.
And of course then, like as the press went on, they were like, follow Philip around and he'll give us something to use.
Yeah, we don't even have to ask him anything. We don't have to say anything. Just like record every word he says and you get your story,
Yeah. And, he'd ask questions like at the Royal Variety performance, he went to Tom Jones and he says, what do you gargle with, pebbles? Like, it was like a joke.
That was a bit of a joke.
It's a bit of a joke,
They considered that a gaffe?
A bit of a gaffe,
I mean, yeah. I mean, he said worse things.
Well, and then he went to Canada in 1969 and then he said, I declare this thing open, whatever it is,
I freaking love that, because that is exactly the way they portray him in The Crown, isn't it? He just hated that kind of thing. Like,
he hated the waving. He didn't like the scraping and the bowing. He just wanted to be a toff, basically.
Well, no, in The Crown they make it like he wants to do a bit more like important, slightly more meaningful. He was
very. They always say that he was very interested. It wasn't just like, and what do you do? Oh yes, he wasn't like Charles.
Yeah.
Charles has his own, like, he's got his own thing, but everything else can go to hell,
Yeah.
He's like, I don't care about this.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, very nice. Oh, yes, Bond premiere. Oh, yes, I don't care. Tour of Pinewood Studios. Yes, no, I'm not interested in this.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in my plants.
Yeah.
And the environment and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's his, thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Philip was just interested in everything.
He was interested in everything, but he hated, the ribbon cutting.
He hated the ribbon cutting and, he'd say stuff like, and of course then, he went to his only state visit to China, where he said to a group of British students there, and this is probably his most famous one, actually.
Yeah. And it's a pretty bad one.
It's a pretty bad one. He said to a group of British students in Beijing who were studying Mandarin, he goes, "Oh, if you stay here any longer, your eyes will all be slitty.
You'll be slitty-eyed."
You'll be slitty-eyed, yeah.
Yeah, which is just cringe,
And that was in 1986 he said this,
And I am not making excuses for anything, but at the same time, you do have to take into consideration that saying things like that, even it was already not okay in, what was it, the 80s, right? It was definitely not okay by then. But if you were of a certain generation, if
it was okay to say that kind of thing.
Well, it's not that it was okay, but it's just when they were young, when they were living their lives, it was okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, everybody said that.
Yeah, everybody
all my fellow white people said that.
Right, and nobody criticized anybody for saying that kind of thing. Again, I'm not saying that is okay, but you also do have to accept that was a reality at that time.
Yeah, and then one of the students said to him then, further on, said, "Oh, well, actually, we don't actually live with our Chinese counterparts here." And he said something like, "Oh, so the Chinese don't want to live with the barbarians then?"
There you go. Yeah. So it's a bit of an equal opportunity offender.
Yes. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, he didn't And then, I think in 1995, he was talking to a Scottish driving instructor. And he says, "How do you keep the natives off the booze long enough to pass the test?"
Oh, Christ.
So there you go. He's Duke of Edinburgh saying that about... How do you keep the natives off the natives off the booze? It's like... Yeah, it's like, oh, he's a big racist and misogynist. It's like... He didn't seem to care about what he said about anyone. He was an equal opportunity offender,
Oh, God, yeah.
And then Cambridge University car park attendant failed to recognise him then, and he was like a bloody silly fool. He called him that. He said, "You bloody silly fool, I'm the Duke of Edinburgh."
For not recognizing.
Not recognising him. He goes, "Oh, sorry, sir. It was some story." And then he toured some electronics factory in Edinburgh.
Well, it's a bit silly, isn't it?
Yes. And then he toured some electronics factory in Edinburgh.
Oh, God.
And there was a fuse box, and he goes, "Oh, it's a bloody mess, that fuse box. Looks like an Indian put it in."
Oh, Jesus.
And, it was just like, oh, God, and then, of course, that caused ructions.
I'm sorry, but if you have elderly white people in your family, you heard similar things from somebody at some point that just made you want to crawl under something and die.
Yes.
So criticizing him, all of these people who have criticized him for saying these things over the year, yes, he should have known better. But at the same time, I'm sure every single person criticizing them has heard something from some white old person, relative,
old
in
white
their
man,
family. Yes,
yells at cloud. That meme. It's like that's what it is.
It's just oh Jesus Christ. Oh God, can you just not talk? You just want to go. Can you just not say things?
Well,
please?
That's what it is. He had to come out and apologize for that.
Did he? Did he apologize?
Yeah. He released a statement.
Well, that's good.
Saying, I didn't mean to cause any offense,
Yeah. Quickly, because we're super out of time already. I don't know. I guess we should have broken this into two separate podcasts, because I think we could probably go on about this. But I was impressed by the fact that I have heard that he said, "What? I don't want any fuss.
Don't want any fuss at my funeral. I don't want a state funeral."
He said he didn't want any fuss made.
Yes. No pomp and circumstance.
Yeah.
Or pageantry or anything like that. Just quiet process. And in this climate of the COVID climate, you know, it's easier to do that, I think, you know.
Yeah. Is it normal because he's being cremated? Is that normal for a member of a royal family? I mean,
I guess if it's their wishes. I mean, he wasn't anything in the, you know, like, he wasn't like, he was a senior royal family member.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a senior royal, if that makes any sense. You know, he wasn't like the Queen or anything.
Right.
If the Queen says,
he wasn't
I want to be cremated, they'd be like, nah,
yeah,
can't do that with you, I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah, okay, right.
I think there's protocols to be observed.
If you're married into the family, then do what you want.
You can do what you want. Isn't that right, Megan?
Oh, God. And speaking of them, really quick before we end this, as soon as we heard the news that he had died, the first thing I thought was, that's going to be an awkward funeral.
Well, Harry's coming back for it.
Yeah.
Harry's coming back, and he's leaving Meghan at home this time, you know.
That's the best decision.
Yes,
I think.
Because I mean, if now and he released a statement saying, "Oh yeah, my cheeky grandpa," you know, he was very cheeky, and it was kind of like a joint thing, you know, instead of that one that was like, "Oh, thank you, Duke of Edinburgh, you will be missed."
Yeah, thank you for your service.
And everybody
like
was
they barely knew him.
Like they barely knew him. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very clinically kind of like, you know. Like,
I just thought, if I'm the royal family, I would have asked them not to come because of the media circus that having them there would cause. But of course, if they asked them not to come, then probably a big deal. Then probably a big deal would have been made about that had they asked them not to come. So I think it's good. She stays home. He goes. The end. You know.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best decision they could have.
Meghan's apparently been advised by her doctors not to travel, but Harry is going to go, you know.
Yeah,
I think Harry's back in the UK already.
He's already back, yeah. So we're recording this on Monday. When is the funeral supposed to be?
The 17th, I think.
Oh, so Harry's already over there.
He's got to get everything repaired. He's got to repair his reputation.
Oh my God.
Has her.
Yeah. Anyway, we gotta go.
Yeah.
We're over time.
As always. But you enjoyed this episode, didn't you? I was waffling on about the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yes. Let us know your thoughts on the Duke of Edinburgh dying and Harry and Meghan and the funeral and all of that kind of stuff, because I am interested to know what you guys all think.
Yes.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your support. Be sure to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TButty, TEABUTTY. And we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.